Hello, beautiful people. I'm Chris Maddox, founder of the Wild Woman Project and Wild Woman Fest. And I'm speaking to you today because we always meet like this on the moon times. So the full moon will arrive depending upon your time zone on September 1st or 2nd. And for this full moon, I wanted to make a little offering of story time. So, in this noisy, tumultuous, technological sphere that we meet in, I know there's like a culture of skimming and scanning and hurrying and rushing to the next thing. And it's like hopping to the next lily pad. So, I want to encourage you at this full moon time as a little gift to yourself to do something to signify that you're actually going to be present for this. So, obviously, I think full screening it is good. And maybe if you can sit in your favorite spot and light a candle, or sit out on your porch or your front stoop or under your favorite tree to take this in, and maybe have a little journal next to you so you can catch any thoughts or feelings or memories that come through as we sit together. So, make any adjustments. You're welcome to pause me if you want and make any adjustments to the space, move where you want to go, and we will sit together. So I want to start us by lighting the candle. If you have a candle, you can light with me. If not, I light it for us. Let this flame represent the wild spirit which burns within each of us. As we awaken our own wild spirit, we awaken the collective spirit. So we're going to talk today about sort of like what I mean when I say wild, and a little bit about my journey into kind of meeting that word and what it represents, and kind of growing in my rewilding process, or unfurling or untangling, however you want to think of it. There's a lot of ways that you can sort of look at the process of going from a state of domestication, or being civilized, being a part and a product of modern society, modern thought processes, systems, economic systems like capitalism, and systems of government like democracy. I'm from the United States. That's the form I grew up in, and the culture that we have ingested through our educational systems, and which is different depending upon where on earth you are, and who was teaching you, and what perspective, and what kind of religious doctrines play into any of these systems. So the process of moving from being a product of modern thinking, consciousness, ways, and systems, to stepping into an orientation which turns us toward nature. And nature, there is a kind of chatterless communion or communication that can happen when we find ourselves in the natural world. And the deeper that we journey into places in nature that have been less touched, and in some rare cases touched by modern systems and modern, industry and ways of thinking. You get access to something very, very primal, timeless, and deeply. It's almost so sacred that you can't name it, but it is a window into, you know, our ancestors, who have been walking this earth for hundreds of thousands of years and lived in all kind of different ways, had all kinds of different stories that we have never heard, that have been lost on modern consciousness and the modern systems. But perhaps their memory lives in, the earth where their bones, where their ashes lay, under layers and layers and layers of earth. And one of the things that, most of our ancestors had the gift and challenge of was living in real intimate relationship with the natural world. you know Archaeological and anthropological evidence shows that, hunter-gatherer tribes all over the world, they existed like that for hundreds of thousands of years, moving around. The concept of staying in one place wasn't in the consciousness. The concept of owning a piece of land was not in the consciousness. But they walked around and found in nature everything that they needed. They looked at the natural world as the bestower of so many gifts: shelter, food, water. And yes, they had to become, strong and agile to navigate, moving around like that. Uh, Building shelters for sleeping, hunting, foraging. And, we can only really imagine what our ancestors, what their kind of consciousness was like, what their rituals were. There is some evidence, um, and there is some remembrance in certain indigenous uh, tribes and traditions that still, you know, do their best in this industrialized world to hold and pass down their traditions and their stories, you know, in spite of great efforts to destroy them and their way of life and their stories throughout history up to modern times. So when we talk, about wild, I think uh, that was the name. The Wild Woman Project came to me in 2011, and we officially launched the Wild Woman Project on January 1st, 2012. And at that time, that word wild, like if you would have asked me then, and you go back on our website years and years and years, I was just beginning to walk through the door of, or the threshold, I should say, of this journey that I will be on for the rest of my life, which is walking deeper and deeper into a, a s- hmm, deeper and deeper into this almost like primordial consciousness that I'm trying to find. Because I'm a person living in the modern world. I didn't grow up like the majority of people on this earth did not grow up in an indigenous tribe, where where we can ask our elders or our teachers or to tell us the stories, show us the ways. But the opportunity of this moment for modern people, as we feel the rumbles of a lot of the very new systems like capitalism, like democracy. In terms of our big span of history, capitalism's like a few hundred years old, and it's not doing well. It's harming. And there's a lot of really smart people, economic anthropologists, kind of trying to teach us about different ways that we have organized and different possibilities. And so that's not my that's not my area of genius. It's an area of curiosity, and I really hope it is for everyone else. Like, how do we continue to live here without killing the planet and killing one another, is a really, really important question. It's a question of our time. If you're alive right now, it's a question that is in the collective. It's a huge question. So, what was I got a little. Yeah. Okay. So I was just beginning to walk into my curiosity, and I want to tell a little story about my rewilding process in honor of. And the reason I want to tell this story today is it's the full moon, the last full moon of this year-long focus that we've held as a larger community, this theme of rituals of rewilding that we've been exploring, moon cycle after moon cycle, circle after circle, wild woman school after wild woman school, and just held for so many of us in our consciousness. So I've been holding this, just like every one of you who have been holding this, circle leaders and circle participants, and those of you who have been coming to Wild Woman School or following along on our social media or on our newsletter. I wanted to talk about this process because I really believe in telling our stories. And that's part of the beauty of being in circle. And that's why it's like the primary focus for us at the Wild Woman Project is encouraging and helping and tool building, um, so that we sit in circle together, whether that's in person or whether that's online, that we get present with one another and have time to reflect on our life's adventure, our life's journey, and to be able to be witnessed in our stories and also to witness others. Because when we sit like that, when we sit in story time, there is that amazing thing that happens, which is no matter what, we usually find a way to relate. And we say, like, some aspect of the story, like, oh, yeah, I felt a version of that, or my best friend went through something like that, or, whatever it is, we find a way to relate. And that relation is really intrinsically connected to this whole thing of entering that threshold, that portal of the wild consciousness, untamed, undomesticated. There is a sense when we walk into nature that we can feel that we are connected, and everything else is connected to everything else is connected to everything else. So that stirring and resurrecting of the we is part of it. So that's why I tell my story today, so that we can have a little connection on that level, relation. So I want to say that, w- back when I was 26, I think I was. Yeah, I was 26 at the time. I was living in New York City. I'm not from New York City, but I ended up spending a decade of my young adult life there. And it was a place I felt really called to be from childhood. It was like a dream come true to live in that exciting, dynamic spot, which I conceived of I understood it as just culture at its best, people from all over the world coming together and making things and creativity. I just like wanted to be a part of that incredible human energy. And, you know, it is not lost on me that when I was 26, that name, the Wild Woman Project, came to me in that place, which is literally not that it's the center or the epicenter of civilization. It's certainly, I'd say it's, debatable, but I think it's like we could say it's like the center of capitalism or the symbol of capitalism on a global level. So that's sort of like an interesting piece, like in so many stories, myth and folklore and fairy tales and movies and comic books, songs, even there's symbolism, So here I am, a young woman, 26 years old, living in the center of capitalism, the concrete jungle, and I remember I was I had been on my spiritual journey for a few years then. I had been just reaching for, learning about things, spiritual paths. I studied yoga. I began to teach yoga. um, I was a little baby yoga teacher, just sort of reaching for something deeper, and doing a lot of like healing work, as is important, I think, for all of us to do in those early years, and to continue to do for a long time. So I found myself at a bookstore, which is a place where one of my favorite kinds of places in the world, and then certainly in the civilized world. It was actually the Borders bookstore in Columbus Circle. Rest in peace, Borders. Um, and I had heard, several different people had suggested that I read Women Who Run with the Wolves because I had begun leading a women's circle. So they kept making connections. You have to, people who knew that book, you have to read this book, Chris. And after the third time I heard it, I was like, okay, I'm going to buy the book. So I went to that Borders, and I remember really strongly sort of like this visceral memory of like running my fingers across the book titles, and I saw Women Who Run with the Wolves, and it was a black book, and Dr. Estes' name was written on it, and I pulled it out, and the physical, energetic sensation was so strong that it felt like there was electricity coming through my body, through my hands. And that was like, very exciting and sort of like a, what is this? Yeah. So I remember opening up the first pages and going to I don't know if it's the introduction or the chapter one. I think it may be actually be the introduction where Dr. Estes goes into, this comparison of the wolves and the way modern society and industrial growth and modern consciousness has come to devalue, to misunderstand uh, the wolf. You think of stories like childhood stories, like the big bad wolf, this dangerous, savage thing, is derogatory. There's like a derogatory yeah, like a stigma there, right? And she talked about the wolf's nature being instinctual, being caring of the pack, like that idea of the we, the pack. And she goes on throughout that whole book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, like really uh, pulling that as a thread through each chapter. Why in modern consciousness do we put down that which is wild, that which is instinctual, that which is connected to nature, and poses some kind of a threat, you know to um, a lot of the systems that wish to stomp that wild force out in favor of newer systems, and even plowing down plots of land, ancient trees, to put like what, a target. you know um she made a comparison between the wolf and women, and how in so many ways our instinctual nature has been stomped out, has been seen as a threat in the exact same ways, a threat to the systems that want control over. And we know that, the witch burnings in Europe coincided time wise with the with the slave, I forget the name, is a transatlantic slave, when people went and stole people from Africa violently and brought them here. Those were happening around the same time. Okay, that's like the same period of time as we moved into a capitalist framework. The abuse and the stomping down uh, related. So, as I stood in this borders and I held this book, everything in my body was just like, I could feel um, like this current of energy. And I thought, I want to keep following this kind of like invisible thread. So the book for me, because I didn't live in a place where I could go for a hike into the wilderness or go sit underneath a tree, or really, immerse myself in the ocean really and truly, and put my concentration there. This book, this gift of story, was my beginning. And I went through a process of, almost starting to have like an allergic reaction to New York City. It was like the rewilding process got going, the more sensitive I became to the concrete, to the noise, to the, being, apartment style. In that context, you're literally like stacked up, and the more sensitive I became, the more I felt that and feeling the we consciousness in New York City is a special challenge. And it's an amazing dynamic city. It's like much love and respect to New York City. But, you know, if you're really feeling the we, and you're on a subway, that's a lot of energy to be working with. So I started to feel like I can't even hear myself think, like it became so loud. And I ended up moving to Western Massachusetts as my first step out of the city. And that's when I started to deepen my relationship to the natural world by going on hikes in a place that was less built up, a little more wild, That was a deep process. And it was during that period that I initiated the Wild Woman Fest up in the Berkshires. Um, or Columbia County, like right, it's so close. It's like right at the edge of New York and Massachusetts. Um, and started there. And that was very deep. Many of you have been a part of that annual ritual, which we've done we've done 7 festivals in 6 years. And that process of being on a mountain together and being in ritual together and dancing around a fire and howling and doing all sorts of stuff that my that might seem really weird to the modern consciousness, but actually feels really strangely right. And of course, it doesn't, you start to study history as I began to go further back, like further back, not ancient Greece, but further back history, really thinking about, the goddess worshiping tribes, for instance, that existed all over especially in like Mesopotamia and old Europe, um, and sort of just had my world opened up. It's like as I started to walk into the wild consciousness, it's like you're peeling off layers and going, oh, wait, the history that I've learned is like just like 2,000 years, almost maybe 10,000 years, like maybe that's like the max, but human beings have been around for approximately 300,000 years. That's nothing, So just that idea of being around the fire with the women at Wild Woman Fest and dancing, that's what our ancestors did. That had to be part of it. It had to be part of it because they needed fire for warmth. And that's why that the concept of circle is ancient, because there was a time in our human history, no matter where you are coming from on earth, where your people are from, where your ancestry goes back, you know, they got together in circle over and over and over again, warming by the fire. And um, so there's something in us that knows that and you sort of get there and you remember something. And I ended up, so that step into Western Massachusetts, I ended up really having a call and making a choice to go and live in what was for me like my favorite place from childhood, which is the Blue Ridge Mountains. My father grew up here, and in the summers, starting from about the age of 9 or 10, we'd come out to the Blue Ridge Mountains for a week, and it was, in terms of place, my very favorite. It felt like like a hug, like home, um, like a yes. The body said yes. I loved it, so I moved, and that was in 2015. Which is, it was about 5 years ago. Like, oh my gosh, it was 5 years ago. Like now. Wow, that's so funny. My first lease began on September 1st, 2015. Cool. I just put that together. And my 5 years here have been the same process of like pulling back the layers, untangling. So the further I got away from, that sort of New York City modern consciousness, and followed my particular call, which is not going to be everybody's particular call. That had a place in my heart because that's where my dad grew up. There's a something there, a thread. So, each and every person has a different place that feels like that hug. So I followed my truth with that, and have in the past 5 years, my life has become more and more and more and more uh, connected to that I want to say it's like a pure energy that comes through being surrounded by mountains. That's why I'm pointing to the mountains around, to the trees, to the green, to the creek, to the water flowing by, to be able to have access to these amazing gifts, which are state and national parks, and go hiking and be in the woods and build fires regularly and allow the process of being in deeper and deeper communion with nature to work on me as it works on anyone who opens to it. And there's been in my process, this whole time, everything I've just described is like the Wild Woman Project raised me, just as I tend to this project, as I always think of myself like a servant, like a guardian, like a protector. As I tend to it, it offers gifts back, and it the Wild Woman Project. I didn't know it at the time, but like it my life became that, like walking into that wild feminine and like doing it in a creative way and with intention. That idea of like a project, like, okay, I'm gonna do something. I'm going to focus on something. I'm going to dedicate myself here, and I see where it takes me. And the more that I walk the path, which is not always easy. It has a lot of challenge in it, but it offers more, uh, you know, way more love and gifts and blessings and offerings and soul nourishment to me than it does the challenge. Uh, the fruit is so sweet that, it makes me just want to continue to do the work of walking with any women who are interested, any women who feel that call for that wild, that feel like that invisible current of energy through them, and feel called for whatever reason to join us for anything, whether it's, for a session of Wild Woman School online or circle leader training or going to their local circle or participating, watching a video, doing these little, offerings or journaling exercises or whatever I send, just little treasures I try to send out to give back, because the more I walk into that wild consciousness, the more the we is it's not even something I have to think about anymore. It's something that's visceral, that we are together in this. And there is a lot of crazy stuff going on, and people are under a tremendous amount of pressure. And in this country, especially this year, with the way the pandemic has um, challenged us as a human family, and in the United States has specifically put a lot of pressure and shown us a lot of the flaws and the weaknesses in the system that's been the very new organizing system that we've been doing, capitalist and the American experiment, this like democracy. It's very volatile in the we right now. So I want to keep, for myself and for anyone who ever wants to sit with me like you're sitting with me right now, to help us to keep dropping down into, like thinking of the strength of the wild consciousness, the remembrance of our ancestors we couldn't possibly name or know, to connect ourselves to the natural world, which is always trying to give to us and always trying to take care of us, no matter how we collectively abuse her. She's trying to help. So, to tap into that wild, to tap into that wolf, that instinctual consciousness, that knowing, it offers an incredible amount of power, and not power in a egoic sense, but the power of life itself. And life itself is connected to everything else. So it's vast. So as we connect into wild consciousness, as we take our time to steady ourselves in whatever rituals that we have, to plant the soles of our feet on the earth, to take time to slow down, to to share space, even if it's virtual, with the people that are our heart people, our soul people. That as we do that, as we connect to the we, as we connect to the wild, as we connect ourselves to this great big strength, if it's true that we're all connected, and science would tell us yes, most spiritual traditions would tell us yes, that there is an interdependence between all things, then us connecting into that wild consciousness, taking time to go deep, not be reactive, but go deep into the level of like, I think of it like the soul's voice versus the mental, the soul's voice, a deeper presence. Then if we're all connected, we're sending that out into the great big vast being that we are. And isn't that a beautiful offering? So that's a little bit about my story, my understanding of the word wild, which, like any word, is completely and totally inadequate to the task of naming such a great big force. And I hope that in another 10 years that I'll be talking to you and looking back on this way I understood it, the word wild, and go like, oh, wasn't that sweet? I barely knew. And that's the essence of rewilding. Re is again and again and again and again and again and again. So if we are rewilding, it never stops. It just goes round and round, like the moon, like the earth around the sun, like the seasons, like days and nights, like all the things in nature. It goes round and round and round. So I want to encourage you, if you do have your journal, to take some time and ask yourself, in your process, in your adventure, in your journey, what have been your moments of touching the wilderness? Your points of rewilding. And especially if you've been following this focus, Rituals of Rewilding, for this whole year, I really hope that you take some time to write down your points of rewilding that have happened in this whole year. I have a couple of pages in my journal where I've just made bullet points. I'm like, whoa, I'm totally thinking about this different, and whoa, isn't that more in tune with the wild? And how interesting, and those kinds of things that we cognitively sort of process the experiences that we have, that helps us to grow and to continue to walk our path with awareness. So take some time, and you can journal about it. But if you have like a best friend or a fellow wild woman that you want to call, or a relative that you can talk to about such things, and you'd like to talk with someone, you should, pick up the phone, call them, you know, and see if they want to have a little conversation. Say, I want to tell you a little story, as there's something about telling our story and being heard that's really, really sweet. So I really thank you for listening to me today. Tell my little story, tiny little story in the great, big, vast expanse of time and space. So it's with great love that, I say we have 2 more weeks of this Rituals of Rewilding series, and we'll start a whole new one on the next new moon, a new point of focus, which I'm really excited about. I've already told our circle leaders, and they're preparing their circles. So I'll tell you on the new moon. So I hope you look forward to that surprise, and we can continue to grow together. So, in honor of this Rituals of Rewilding close out, we're having our final Wild Woman School of this series, which will happen on September 10th. It's online, you can join from anywhere. And the theme for the community ritual is resurrecting the primordial feminine. So, we're going to really walk into the wild together with the tools that we have: our body, our breath, our focus, our attention, our presence. And we will be together in this vast space, coming together online. And just so you know, like, cameras are turned off. We really tune in on an energetic level. I'll lead you through meditation, breath work. There will be music and stories and journaling and contemplations and all sorts of fun things, and sharing. So I hope, if that seems like something that calls to you, that you'll join us. And that's choose your own price, and there are scholarships available. If you need one, don't be afraid to ask. Okay. And yeah, so link below this video for that. And I want to make an announcement of something coming up really soon. So we have circle leader training coming this fall. And circle leader training begins in November, on November 2nd. It's 7 weeks. It's online from anywhere. It's extremely rich with content. Um, it is in part like personal development and cultivation in the way of the wild woman into this instinctual self and knowing and all the things that come with that. And then it's part skill building to prepare you, should you wish, to facilitate a circle for your friends, for your community members, for larger audiences. If you have already like you're a helping professional of some kind, a coach, a therapist, etc. If you want to add circle to what you're offering, so if you do it professionally, like, it really runs the gamut in terms of, some people take it just for their personal development, and maybe they lead their closest friends or family members. And some people, have public circles that happen at community centers and yoga studios, etc. So it will prepare you to facilitate. in your way where you feel called, and all in the way of the wild woman. So we've been leading this training. First one I did was even before I launched the Wild Woman Project back in 2011. I've been leading it regularly. We're really, really proud of the program, and we're told over and over again how valuable it is for people. And yeah, so if that feels like something you want to be a part of, please check it out. Registration is going to open up on the equinox, September 22nd at noon Eastern time. So I'll put a link below this video. And if you really want to get in there, I recommend putting your name on our email list that's on the page that the link is at, because I will email you that list, which is a smaller list of people, and tell you exactly when registration opens. And the last mini rounds, like the last 13 rounds or something, have totally filled up. So if you want to be a part of it, I do recommend getting prepared to act more swiftly. um, yeah, and there are scholarships available for that and payment plans, and we keep it really affordable in the first place. But please, if you feel the call, I hope that you'll go for it. And you can always email us at support at the Wild Woman Project if you ever have any questions about anything and about that program. So, those are my couple of announcements. And I just want to send you some love and encouragement and a remembrance that you're not alone if you're feeling overwhelmed, in pain, if you're struggling, which the statistics are showing people really are right now. And I know in my personal sphere, like, you know let's take care of each other, okay? And I just want you to know you're not alone, and that you're loved, and that nature loves you. And there are so many different ways that you can connect to nature and her unconditional love. So, thank you so much. If you have your candle lit, please join me in blowing it out. Happy full moon. We go inhale, exhale. Oh.